This is a video by Richpin. Today we're working on a Dodge Neon. This one happens to be a 2002 model. And today we're going to be replacing the alternator. Now the first thing we need to do is remove the negative battery cable from the battery. Next we need to jack up the vehicle, put it on jack stands, and remove the right front tire wheel assembly. Next we need to remove this splash panel right here that's behind the right wheel. There are two 10mm head bolts that secure it up in this area and one push pin right here. And once you get those off, you can remove that panel. Next thing we need to do is turn the steering wheel all the way to the right, put the caliper in this position right here. Next thing we need to do is remove this brace right here. It's held on by two 15mm headed nuts. Next we need to get the electrical wires off the back of the alternator. The main lead right here is held on by a 10mm head nut. Make sure you use a lot of penetrating oil on that because most of them are rusted in. And once that is removed, the nut is removed, you can take that wire out of the way. Now the next one is this connection right up here. Now if you look right here, you can see a red lock. Take your screwdriver and then you pry against the housing there and move that lock down into this position. Now once it's in that position, you can reach up, squeeze this little black piece on the connector right here, and then slide the electrical connector off. That little red piece is the lock right there and has to be moved into that position before you can press this little piece right here. Okay, and that's all for the electrical connections. While you're down here, it'd be a good idea to put a little penetrating oil right in this area right here and a little bit on the nut. Next we need to loosen the bottom pivot bolt on the alternator. This one right here. Okay. Next we need to remove the top nut that secures the alternator to the adjusting bracket right down here. Now what I'm going to use is a open-end 15mm wrench with a short piece of pipe. And we're going to get that wrench down there. Get this extension on there. And keep moving it around into a position that you can get at it. Okay, now it's loose enough so we don't need the pipe for leverage, and we can just use the regular wrench. And it would be a good idea to spray that nut down there with some penetrating oil to help in removing that. Has a shouldered washer on it also, and there's the nut. Now the next thing we need to do, put a little penetrating oil on the thread of this bolt right here, and we need to turn this bolt all the way out. Make sure you don't drop the adjusting bolt that this bolt screws into, and we need to remove that so we can get this bolt that holds the alternator to the bracket out. Okay, next we need to remove the bottom pivot bolt from the alternator. Okay, now what you want to do is wiggle the alternator around in the bracket and give it a little spray of penetrating oil, and you'll get it loosen and it'll come off the bracket. You gotta keep moving it around, and there it is. And we can let it sit right there. Next we need to remove the bracket right here that the alternator was bolted to. It's held on by 3 15mm headed bolts. And we need to remove those now. Now before I remove these 3 bolts that hold the bracket that holds the alternator on, what I'm doing is supporting it with a piece of dowel. It's about 7 1/4 inches in length, and that will keep the alternator off the bracket. Now even with this dowel in here, be very careful it doesn't come down and crush your fingers. There's the bracket. Okay, let's try to get this down safely. It's a tight fit getting this alternator out. Okay, there she is. She's out. Now, one thing I forgot to mention before you removed the alternator from the bracket was to take the belt off. The reason I didn't catch that was this one right here seized the alternator up and burnt the belt right off. You can see pieces of the belt right here stuck to the pulley. Okay, now it's just a matter of putting your new alternator back in and putting everything back into place. The most important thing is to remember what angle you took the alternator out. If you have any problem, you could probably slow-mo this video and check out how it came out so you can get it back in. And that's it. That's all there is to removing an alternator in your Dodge Neon.